There are moments in life when you begin to sense that something unusual is happening behind the scenes. Moments when the energy around you shifts in subtle but undeniable ways. You may not immediately understand why certain people suddenly become more curious about your life, why their questions feel strangely calculated, or why their attention toward you seems more intense than before. What you may not realize at first is that your presence, your character, and the way you move through life has stirred something powerful in the minds of others. Instead of simply observing you from a distance, someone became so intrigued, suspicious, or even threatened by who you are that they decided to go far beyond normal curiosity. In fact, the situation escalated to a level most people would never imagine, because someone actually went out of their way to investigate you privately. Somewhere behind closed doors, decisions were made. Conversations took place where your name came up again and again. People began speculating about your intentions, your background, your lifestyle, and the way you carry yourself. For reasons that had more to do with their own uncertainty than with anything you had done, they convinced themselves that you must be hiding something. Your calm confidence made them uncomfortable. Your silence when others expected drama confused them. And the fact that you seemed unaffected by the chaos around you made them believe there had to be something deeper beneath the surface. So instead of trying to understand you honestly, they chose another path. They decided to look into your life from the shadows. A private investigation began, quietly and without your knowledge, driven by the belief that if someone looked closely enough, they would eventually uncover something shocking about you. They were convinced that beneath the composed image you present to the world, there must be secrets, contradictions, or some hidden truth that would expose you. Yet what makes this entire situation so astonishing is that the deeper they looked, the more their assumptions began to collapse. Because what they eventually discovered was not the scandal they expected, not the deception they imagined, but something far more powerful and far more unsettling for those who doubted you. What they found was proof that the person they had been trying so hard to question was exactly who they appeared to be all along. And that realization turned the entire investigation into something completely different from what they intended. Begins with understanding why certain people become unusually obsessed with your life. Because curiosity alone rarely grows into the kind of fixation that pushes someone to secretly investigate another person. Something deeper always sits beneath that decision. When people first encounter someone like you, they often notice something they cannot easily explain. It is not always loud confidence or obvious authority that catches their attention. In many cases, it is something quieter, but far more unsettling for them. A calm presence that does not react the way most people expect. You move through situations with a level of composure that others struggle to understand. When people around you panic, you remain steady. When others rush to defend themselves, you observe. When conflict appears, you do not immediately feed the drama. This difference may seem small on the surface, but psychologically, it creates a powerful effect on the people watching you. Human beings are used to predictable reactions. They expect anger to be met with anger, accusations to be met with defense, and pressure to produce visible stress. When someone breaks that pattern, it confuses the social expectations people rely on to understand one another. Your composure disrupts those expectations, and that disruption often triggers curiosity that slowly transforms into suspicion. Instead of accepting that you simply possess emotional discipline or inner stability, some individuals begin constructing explanations that fit their own worldview. They start asking themselves questions that are not really about you, but about their own discomfort. Why does this person stay calm when others would explode? Why do they not seem affected by gossip or criticism? Why do they move through life with such quiet certainty? These questions begin as curiosity, but when answers are not immediately available, imagination steps in to fill the gaps. The human mind dislikes uncertainty, so it builds stories to resolve that tension. Some people create positive interpretations, believing that you possess wisdom, self-control, or deep awareness. Others, however, build darker narratives. They convince themselves that calmness must be a mask. They assume that silence must hide manipulation. And they begin to believe that your stability cannot be genuine because it highlights the instability they feel inside themselves. This is where curiosity begins its transformation into obsession. The more they observe you, the more their assumptions shape what they believe they see. Small details become exaggerated. Ordinary actions become suspicious. Even your routine choices begin to appear mysterious through the lens of their imagination. Perhaps you prefer privacy and do not share every detail of your life with everyone around you. Instead of respecting that boundary, they interpret it as secrecy. Perhaps you avoid unnecessary arguments and choose your words carefully. Instead of recognizing wisdom, they interpret it as calculation. Gradually, the story they tell themselves about you becomes more vivid than reality itself. At this point, your very existence begins to challenge something inside them. Your composure forces them to confront a possibility that many people find uncomfortable. That someone else may possess a level of clarity they do not yet understand. Rather than explore that discomfort honestly, some individuals attempt to resolve it by bringing you down to their level of understanding. If they can prove that you are hiding something, manipulating something, or deceiving others in some way, then their confusion disappears. Suddenly, your calmness is no longer impressive. It becomes suspicious. Your silence is no longer disciplined. It becomes secretive. And your confidence is no longer admirable. It becomes threatening. This mental shift is what fuels the obsession. The person who becomes fixated on you begins paying closer attention to your life than they ever intended. They watch how others respond to you. They notice that some people respect you, trust you, or feel comfortable around you. Instead of seeing that as a result of your character, they interpret it as influence that must have been earned through hidden tactics. Their mind continues searching for evidence that will confirm the story they have created. Each time they fail to find that evidence, the obsession intensifies. Ironically, the more consistent your behavior remains, the more their suspicion grows. Consistency should normally build trust, but for someone already committed to their narrative, consistency becomes proof that you are hiding something carefully. In their imagination, a person who never slips must be controlling the image they present to the world. The truth, however, is far simpler and far more powerful than the story they have built. What they are witnessing is not a performance, but alignment. You behave the same way privately that you behave publicly, because you are not trying to manage multiple identities. The calmness they observe is not a mask, but a reflection of internal stability. Your refusal to engage in unnecessary conflict is not avoidance, but wisdom developed through experience. Yet, someone who is determined to believe otherwise will not see this clearly. Instead, they interpret your stability as a puzzle that must be solved. And puzzles invite investigation. This is how curiosity quietly crosses a boundary and becomes something far more intrusive. The individual who once casually wondered about you now feels compelled to know everything about you. They begin asking questions about your past. They listen carefully when others speak about you. They observe your habits, your schedule, your interactions. Each small observation feeds their growing belief that there must be something hidden beneath the surface. The irony of this situation is that your life likely appears quite ordinary when viewed honestly. You work, you think, you learn, you grow, and you navigate life with awareness. But to someone who has already decided that there must be a secret, ordinary behavior becomes suspicious precisely because it appears so balanced. This psychological pattern has appeared throughout history. Whenever individuals encounter someone whose inner stability challenges their expectations. Philosophers, leaders, and thinkers who maintained composure under pressure were often misunderstood by those who could not interpret their behavior accurately. Calmness, when rare, can appear mysterious. Discipline, when uncommon, can appear intimidating. And authenticity, when unfamiliar, can provoke doubt rather than admiration. What makes this dynamic even more fascinating is that you may not even realize how closely you are being observed. While you continue living your life with the same quiet consistency, someone else may be analyzing every detail in an attempt to confirm their suspicions. They may review past interactions, replay conversations in their mind, or interpret neutral situations as evidence of hidden meaning. The more they analyze, the deeper they fall into the narrative they created. Eventually, this internal process reaches a turning point. Observation alone no longer satisfies their curiosity. They feel they need confirmation. They want proof that their suspicions are correct. And when people reach that point, they sometimes make decisions that reveal far more about their mindset than about the person they are investigating. Instead of speaking openly or seeking understanding directly, they begin looking for ways to uncover information without your knowledge. This is where the situation shifts from simple curiosity into something far more deliberate. The person who became obsessed with understanding you decides that watching from a distance is not enough. They convince themselves that if they could just dig a little deeper, look a little closer, or follow your life more carefully, the truth would finally reveal itself. In their mind, the calm person they cannot figure out must eventually slip. Every human being has flaws, they tell themselves. Every person has something to hide. And if they look closely enough, they believe they will eventually find the evidence they need to confirm what they have already decided must be true. Yet the deeper irony of this entire situation is that the obsession they develop says far more about their inner world than it ever could about yours. When someone becomes fixated on exposing another person, it often reflects their own unresolved insecurity. Your composure reminds them of the chaos they feel inside. Your patience highlights the impulsiveness they struggle to control. Your clarity exposes the confusion they have not yet confronted within themselves. Instead of acknowledging that contrast honestly, they attempt to eliminate it by proving that you are not as stable as you appear. This is why the story of someone secretly investigating you often begins not with evidence of wrongdoing, but with discomfort in the presence of authenticity. They do not investigate because they already know something is wrong. They investigate because your existence challenges the story they tell themselves about how the world works. And when that challenge becomes too strong to ignore, curiosity evolves into obsession. Obsession evolves into investigation. And the quiet life you continue living becomes the subject of a search that will ultimately reveal something very different from what they expected. The situation quietly moves from curiosity into action, because there always comes a moment when suspicion grows too strong to remain a thought inside someone's mind. For the person who became increasingly obsessed with understanding you, simple observation eventually stopped being enough. They had already spent time watching from a distance, analyzing your behavior, replaying conversations, and collecting fragments of information about your life. Yet none of those efforts delivered the confirmation they were expecting. Every time they looked closer, they saw the same calm consistency that had confused them from the beginning. Instead of exposing contradictions, your actions continued to align with the character you presented publicly. For someone determined to find a hidden story, this kind of consistency becomes frustrating. It creates a tension inside their mind because the evidence they are observing does not support the conclusion they already formed about you. Rather than reconsider their assumptions, they begin searching for new ways to prove themselves right. This is the psychological moment when curiosity quietly transforms into something far more deliberate. The person who once wondered about you begins convincing themselves that they simply have not looked deeply enough. They start imagining that the truth must exist somewhere beyond the surface of your everyday life. Maybe, they think, your public behavior is carefully controlled. Maybe your calm demeanor is part of a larger strategy. Maybe there are details hidden in places they cannot see from the outside. These thoughts gradually reshape their reasoning. Instead of questioning whether their suspicion is valid, they become certain that the missing evidence must exist somewhere out of sight. And when people reach that level of certainty, they often begin taking steps that reveal just how far their imagination has carried them. The idea of quietly investigating your life begins to feel justified in their mind. They convince themselves that they are not doing anything wrong. In fact, they may even believe they are protecting themselves or protecting others by uncovering what they think must be the truth about you. The mind is very capable of turning intrusive actions into something that feels reasonable when someone is emotionally invested in a particular narrative. This is how the decision slowly forms. Instead of continuing to speculate, they begin exploring ways to gather information that you never intended to share. The idea of hiring someone to observe you may have first appeared as a passing thought, something that seemed extreme or unrealistic. Yet, as their obsession deepened, that idea started to feel less shocking and more like a solution. If they could place someone else between themselves and the investigation, someone trained to look closely and quietly collect information, they believed they would finally obtain the proof they were searching for. This is the moment when the story shifts into something almost unbelievable, because someone actually made the choice to involve a private investigator or a person acting in that role. Behind closed doors, conversations likely took place where your name became the center of speculation. Questions were raised about your past, your relationships, your habits, and the way you navigate your daily life. The person orchestrating this investigation probably explained their suspicions with great confidence. They may have described you as mysterious, calculating, or secretive. They may have pointed out your calmness and discipline as evidence that you were hiding something beneath the surface. The investigator listening to this explanation might not have known what to expect. For them, this was simply another assignment, another situation where someone wanted information about another person's life. But for the person initiating the investigation, it felt like the beginning of a mission that would finally reveal the truth. Once the decision was made, the investigation began quietly and without your knowledge. From your perspective, nothing unusual appeared to be happening. You continued moving through your life in the same steady way you always had. You woke up, completed your responsibilities, interacted with people, and handled situations with the same level of composure that had always defined your character. Yet somewhere nearby, someone may have begun observing those routines with a level of attention most people never experience. Investigations like this rarely start with dramatic actions. Instead, they begin with patient observation. The investigator might have taken note of your daily schedule, the places you visit, the people you interact with regularly. They may have watched how you behave in different environments, at work, in public spaces, during ordinary moments when most people assume no one is paying attention. The expectation behind this type of observation is always the same. If a person is hiding something, Eventually, their behavior will reveal contradictions. The investigator looks for inconsistencies between how someone presents themselves publicly and how they behave privately. Yet, as the days of observation passed, something unusual likely began to emerge. Instead of discovering hidden contradictions, they may have found the same person appearing in every situation. The calm demeanor that others saw publicly was not disappearing when you were alone or when you believed no one was watching. Your actions remained consistent regardless of the environment. The discipline they expected to be a performance continued, even during quiet moments when there was no audience to impress. For someone who began the investigation expecting scandal, this kind of consistency can be surprising. The investigator may have started noticing patterns that challenged the assumptions they were given at the beginning of the assignment. Instead of secretive meetings or suspicious behavior, they saw routines built around responsibility and purpose. Instead of dramatic confrontations or manipulative interactions, they observed calm conversations and measured responses. Each observation gradually created a clearer picture of who you actually are. A picture that looked very different from the narrative that originally triggered the investigation. Meanwhile, the person who initiated the search for answers likely waited with anticipation. In their mind, the investigation was only a matter of time before it uncovered something shocking. They may have imagined the moment when the investigator would return with evidence confirming every suspicion they had formed about you. Perhaps they believed the report would reveal hidden relationships, secret activities, or behavior that contradicted the calm image you presented to the world. The imagination of someone expecting scandal can create elaborate scenarios long before any evidence exists. Yet reality does not always cooperate with those expectations. As the investigation continued, the information being gathered probably began to tell a very different story. Instead of uncovering deception, the investigator may have discovered discipline. Instead of manipulation, they observed patience. Instead of secrecy, they encountered privacy that appeared healthy rather than suspicious. This gradual realization can create a strange moment for someone tasked with finding wrongdoing. When the evidence does not support the narrative they were given, the investigation itself begins to transform into something unexpected. Rather than exposing the person under observation, it begins revealing the strength of their character. What makes this situation particularly fascinating is that you remained completely unaware of how closely someone was studying your life. You continued living authentically, not adjusting your behavior to impress anyone, because you did not know anyone was watching. That authenticity becomes the most powerful form of evidence possible. When someone behaves consistently both publicly and privately, it leaves little room for the kind of scandal people expect to uncover through surveillance. Every ordinary moment becomes confirmation of something simple but profound. The person they suspected of hiding something extraordinary was actually just living their life with integrity. As the investigation moved forward, the growing body of observations likely began challenging the assumptions that started the entire situation. Yet by this point, the person who initiated the investigation had already invested emotionally in the idea that you were hiding something. This creates a complicated dynamic, because accepting the truth would require them to admit that their suspicions were wrong from the beginning. For many people, admitting that kind of mistake is far more difficult than maintaining the illusion that they are still searching for answers. Nevertheless, reality has a way of surfacing when evidence accumulates over time. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it likely became that the story they expected to uncover simply did not exist. Instead of revealing a secret life, the investigation slowly exposed something far more unsettling for those who doubted you. the realization that the calm, disciplined, and self-aware person they had questioned was genuine. And in the strange twist of fate that often accompanies situations like this, the very attempt to prove you were hiding something began laying the foundation for proving the exact opposite. Unfolds as the investigation continues deeper into the details of your life. And this is where something remarkable begins to happen. Because the closer someone looks at a life built on authenticity, the harder it becomes to maintain a false narrative about it. At the beginning of the investigation, the person observing you likely believed that patience would eventually reveal the cracks in your character. After all, most investigations operate under the assumption that no one can maintain a perfect image forever. Human beings make mistakes, contradict themselves, behave differently in private than they do in public, and reveal truths over time that they carefully try to hide at first. That expectation probably guided every step of the observation. The investigator may have approached the assignment with professional neutrality, simply following routines, taking notes, and documenting what they saw without emotional attachment. Yet what they began to witness did not fit the pattern of someone hiding a double life. Instead, each new observation quietly reinforced the same impression that had appeared during the earliest stages of their work. The person they were watching lived with an unusual level of internal alignment. Day after day, the details of your life likely revealed habits that reflected discipline rather than deception. Your routines probably showed consistency in areas that many people overlook when they attempt to maintain appearances. The way you manage your time, the way you respond to stress, the way you treat people in ordinary situations where no reputation is at stake. These moments often reveal the true character of a person more clearly than any public image ever could. The investigator may have watched you interact with people who could offer you nothing in return. Strangers, service workers, colleagues who were not influential, individuals who did not possess power or status. These interactions often expose the truth about someone's character, because there is no social reward attached to behaving well in those moments. Yet if your behavior remained respectful, calm, and thoughtful, even in those situations, it would begin to create a pattern that was difficult to dismiss. Consistency across environments is one of the strongest indicators of authenticity. And this is precisely the kind of evidence investigators usually search for when they suspect someone is presenting a false image to the world. As more time passed, the investigator likely expanded their observation beyond simple routines. They may have attempted to understand the context of your life by looking into your past activities, your professional history, the people who know you well, and the environments you move through regularly. This deeper look often reveals contradictions when someone is living behind a mask. Stories fail to align, relationships appear strained or transactional, and patterns of behavior shift dramatically depending on the situation. Yet when a life is built on genuine values, the deeper investigation goes, the more coherent the story becomes. Pieces that once appeared mysterious begin fitting together naturally. Your calmness may have started to make sense when viewed alongside experiences that shaped your patience. Your refusal to participate in unnecessary drama may have reflected lessons learned from past conflicts. Your privacy may have revealed itself not as secrecy, but as a conscious boundary that protects your peace and focus. The investigator may have realized something subtle but powerful during this process. Your life was not designed to impress anyone watching from the outside. It was structured around principles that existed long before anyone thought to observe you. This realization creates a fascinating shift in the dynamic of an investigation. When an observer begins with the expectation of uncovering wrongdoing, but instead discovers stability, the assignment quietly transforms into something very different from what they expected. Instead of gathering evidence against you, they begin documenting evidence of your integrity. Each routine moment becomes another confirmation that the person they were told to suspect behaves the same way whether anyone is watching or not. Even the quiet details of your daily life may have contributed to this realization. The investigator might have noticed how you spend time alone. Whether that time is filled with productive thought, learning, reflection, or simply maintaining balance in your life. Solitude often exposes people who are pretending to be something they are not, because performance usually requires an audience. But someone who is comfortable with themselves behaves the same way in solitude that they do in public, because their actions are guided by internal standards rather than external approval. Observing this kind of consistency can create a strange sense of respect, even for someone who began the assignment with skepticism. Professional investigators are trained to notice patterns, and patterns of discipline are difficult to ignore. Over time, the observer may have realized that the story they were asked to confirm was becoming increasingly difficult to support. Instead of finding deception, they saw patience. Instead of manipulation, they saw restraint. Instead of a hidden agenda, they saw someone who appeared focused on living their life with clarity and purpose. The deeper they looked, the more the evidence suggested that the person behind the investigation had misunderstood you from the very beginning. Meanwhile, the individual who initiated the investigation likely remained convinced that something would eventually surface. People who become emotionally invested in a suspicion often struggle to accept evidence that contradicts their belief. They may have waited for updates from the investigator with growing anticipation, expecting that each new report would bring them closer to the dramatic revelation they imagined. Perhaps they pictured the moment when hidden secrets would finally be exposed and their doubts would be validated. Yet the reports coming back may have told a very different story. Instead of dramatic discoveries, the investigator may have described ordinary days filled with disciplined behavior. Instead of suspicious activities, they documented consistent routines. Instead of contradictions, they found alignment between your public presence and your private life. At first, the person who initiated the investigation may have dismissed these findings as incomplete. They might have insisted that the investigator simply had not looked closely enough yet. This is another common stage in situations like this. When someone expects to find wrongdoing, the absence of evidence often convinces them that the truth must still be hidden somewhere deeper. They may have encouraged the investigator to continue watching longer, to examine additional details, to follow more leads. Yet the passage of time often reveals what initial observation only hints at. The longer someone observes a person living authentically, the clearer that authenticity becomes. Eventually, the investigator may have reached a quiet but undeniable conclusion. The life they were studying did not contain the secrets they had been sent to uncover. Instead, it contained something far more unusual in a world that often rewards appearances over substance. It contained a person whose public character matched their private reality. This realization carries a kind of quiet power because it shifts the entire meaning of the investigation. What began as an attempt to expose you gradually became evidence that your character could withstand scrutiny. Every moment someone spent studying your life only strengthened the proof that you were not performing a role for the world to admire. You were simply living according to principles that remain consistent, regardless of who happens to be watching. Ironically, the effort to uncover something outrageous about you began revealing something much more significant. The rarity of authenticity in a world where many people feel pressured to present versions of themselves that do not fully reflect who they are. By the time the investigation reached its deeper stages, the original narrative that triggered it may have already begun collapsing under the weight of reality. And as that reality continued to unfold through observation and evidence, the person who believed they would expose you eventually faced a truth they never expected to encounter. The closer someone looked at your life, the stronger your character appeared. Then as unfolds as the expectations behind the investigation begin colliding with the reality that slowly emerges from careful observation. Because the person who initiated this entire situation never truly expected the results that were forming piece by piece. From the very beginning, their imagination had already written the ending of the story. In their mind, the investigation was simply a process of gathering proof that would confirm everything they believed about you. They expected the investigator to return with shocking revelations, something dramatic that would justify the suspicion that had been growing inside them for so long. Perhaps they imagined hidden relationships, secret financial dealings, manipulation behind closed doors, or evidence that the calm and disciplined image you presented to the world was nothing more than a carefully constructed mask. The human mind has a remarkable ability to build entire scenarios around limited information, especially when emotions like jealousy, insecurity, or resentment are involved. Once someone becomes emotionally invested in the idea that another person must be hiding something, every new detail they hear becomes part of a story they have already decided to believe. That is why the person who sent someone to investigate you was likely waiting with anticipation rather than curiosity. They were not hoping to discover the truth. They were expecting confirmation of what they had already concluded. Yet reality rarely follows the script that imagination writes in advance. As the investigator continued observing your life and documenting their findings, the evidence forming in front of them began telling a very different story. Instead of discovering contradictions, they encountered consistency. Instead of dramatic secrets, they found ordinary discipline. Instead of deception, they observed behavior that aligned with the same calm character people had already seen in you publicly. This quiet but powerful contradiction created a growing tension between expectation and reality. For the investigator, this tension may have been easier to accept because their role was simply to observe and report what they saw. Professional investigators understand that their assignments sometimes uncover truths that differ from what the person hiring them hoped to find. Their responsibility is not to protect assumptions, but to document reality. Yet for the person who initiated the investigation, accepting these results would require something far more difficult: the admission that their entire suspicion may have been built on misunderstanding. And for many people, admitting that kind of mistake can feel almost impossible. Pride, ego, and emotional investment can make it very difficult for someone to accept evidence that contradicts the narrative they have been repeating in their mind. That is why the reports from the investigation may have been met with disbelief at first. When the investigator described your routines, your interactions, and the consistency of your behavior, the person listening may have struggled to accept what they were hearing. They may have questioned the thoroughness of the investigation, wondering if the observer had simply missed the important details. Perhaps they asked whether the investigator had looked deeply enough into your background, your relationships, or your private life. This reaction is common when expectations collapse. Instead of reconsidering their assumptions, people sometimes search for reasons to dismiss the evidence. They convince themselves that the investigation simply has not gone far enough yet. Yet the deeper the investigation continued, the clearer the pattern became. Every new observation reinforced the same impression that had been appearing from the beginning. Your life was not filled with secret schemes or hidden manipulation. It was structured around routines that reflected discipline, focus, and personal integrity. The investigator may have noticed how you handled stress when challenges appeared. Instead of reacting impulsively, you likely approached problems with thoughtfulness and restraint. They may have observed how you interacted with people who disagreed with you or criticized you. Instead of escalating conflict, you responded with calmness or chose to disengage entirely. They may have seen how you spent time alone, noticing that your private moments were not filled with reckless behavior or suspicious activity, but with reflection, productivity, or quiet balance. These observations gradually built a picture that was impossible to ignore. The calm presence that had originally triggered suspicion was not an act performed for public approval. It was a natural extension of the way you lived your life every day. The person who expected scandal began receiving something far more unsettling for their narrative: proof of authenticity. Ironically, the very effort meant to expose you was becoming evidence of your character. Each report that returned from the investigator quietly dismantled the assumptions that had fueled the investigation in the first place. What makes situations like this particularly fascinating is how they reveal the difference between perception and reality. Before the investigation began, the person who doubted you may have been convinced that they understood exactly who you were. They may have interpreted your silence as secrecy, your patience as calculation, and your calmness as manipulation. These interpretations felt real to them because they filled the gaps left by uncertainty. But when someone actually began observing your life with professional attention, those interpretations slowly lost their power. Reality replaced imagination, detail by detail. The routines of your daily life revealed someone who did not need to hide behind elaborate stories, because there was nothing dramatic to conceal. The consistency of your behavior showed that the qualities people noticed in you publicly were simply reflections of how you had trained yourself to live privately. As the investigation moved deeper into its process, the gap between expectation and reality likely became impossible to ignore. The person who initiated the search for scandal now faced a quiet but undeniable truth. The outrageous discovery they expected to uncover was not wrongdoing, but integrity. This realization can create a strange emotional reaction for someone who hoped to expose another person. Instead of feeling satisfied, they may feel embarrassed or even threatened by the results. The investigation they believed would weaken your reputation was instead strengthening it. The more closely someone examined your life, the clearer it became that your character could withstand scrutiny. This shift transforms the entire meaning of the investigation. What began as an attempt to prove that you were hiding something eventually becomes evidence that you are exactly who you appear to be. And this is where the deeper lesson begins to emerge. Authenticity possesses a unique kind of resilience because it does not rely on carefully maintained appearances. A person who builds their life around discipline, awareness, and honesty does not need to adjust their behavior when someone starts paying attention. Their habits already reflect the values they carry internally. The investigator observing you may have recognized this pattern clearly. Instead of discovering contradictions between your public and private behavior, they discovered alignment. Instead of uncovering scandal, they uncovered stability. Instead of revealing deception, they revealed a life that remained consistent regardless of who might be watching. For the person who initiated the investigation, this outcome may have been far more shocking than any secret could have been. They expected to confirm their doubts. Instead, they encountered evidence that challenged their entire understanding of you. The story they told themselves about who you were began to crumble under the weight of observation. And as this realization slowly took shape, the investigation that was meant to expose you began revealing something far more powerful than anyone anticipated. The strength of a life built on authenticity cannot easily be dismantled by suspicion. Begins at the moment when the investigation reaches a stage that neither the person who initiated it nor the investigator themselves originally anticipated. Because once enough time has passed and enough observations have been collected, the truth begins forming a pattern that cannot easily be ignored. What started as a search for hidden wrongdoing slowly transforms into something far more revealing about the nature of your character. The investigator, who once approached the assignment with professional neutrality and perhaps a quiet expectation that some irregularity would eventually appear, now finds themselves facing a growing body of evidence pointing in a completely different direction. Each report, each observation, each small detail collected over days and weeks begins reinforcing the same conclusion. The person they were hired to investigate does not live behind a carefully constructed illusion. Instead, they live with a level of internal alignment that makes deception unnecessary. This realization rarely arrives in a dramatic moment. It emerges gradually, through repetition. The investigator may notice that your behavior remains consistent regardless of context. When you are working, you remain focused and measured. When you interact with people, your responses carry the same calm awareness, whether the conversation is important or ordinary. When challenges arise, you approach them with patience rather than impulsive reaction. These patterns may appear simple at first glance, yet to someone trained to detect inconsistencies, their repetition carries meaning. Consistency across time and circumstance suggests something deeper than a performance. It suggests that the behavior being observed is not a role, but a reflection of genuine values guiding your life. Meanwhile, the person who initiated the investigation likely continues waiting for the dramatic revelation they imagined from the beginning. They may still believe that the investigator simply has not yet discovered the right detail, the hidden piece of information that will finally confirm their suspicions. This belief can persist even when the evidence begins pointing in the opposite direction. The human mind sometimes clings to its original narrative long after reality has begun rewriting the story. Yet even the strongest assumptions eventually face the pressure of accumulated truth. As the investigator continues documenting your routines, the evidence begins forming a portrait that becomes increasingly difficult to dispute. Your daily life appears structured not around manipulation, but around discipline. The way you manage your time reflects intention rather than secrecy. Your interactions with others reveal patience rather than hidden agendas. The investigator may observe that you treat people consistently, regardless of their status or influence. Whether someone holds power or offers nothing in return, your manner remains steady. This kind of behavior is extremely difficult to fake over extended periods because it requires an internal compass rather than a calculated strategy. When someone performs kindness only for appearance, cracks usually appear when no audience is present. But if kindness appears even in quiet moments when recognition is impossible, it signals authenticity. The investigator may also begin noticing how you respond to moments of pressure. Life inevitably brings challenges, misunderstandings, or unexpected conflicts. For someone living behind a mask, those moments often reveal the strain of maintaining an artificial identity. Yet, if your responses remain thoughtful and measured even under pressure, it becomes another powerful indicator that your calm presence is not an act. The discipline others once misinterpreted as mystery begins revealing itself as self-mastery. Over time, the investigator's notes may start reflecting a subtle shift in perspective. What began as a search for wrongdoing slowly evolves into documentation of character. Instead of cataloging suspicious behavior, they find themselves recording examples of consistency, responsibility, and restraint. This shift may not be openly acknowledged at first, but it becomes visible in the tone of their observations. Patterns emerge, showing that the person they were hired to expose appears to live according to principles that remain stable regardless of circumstance. And as this realization grows stronger, the investigation itself begins taking on an ironic quality. The deeper the investigator looks into your life, the clearer it becomes that the original suspicion was not supported by reality. In fact, the closer someone examines your behavior, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the idea that you were hiding something outrageous. Instead, what they find appears almost ordinary in the most powerful sense of the word: a life guided by quiet discipline, thoughtful choices, and internal balance. Meanwhile, the person who initiated the investigation may begin experiencing a different kind of discomfort. Each update from the investigator that fails to reveal wrongdoing forces them to confront the possibility that their assumptions were misplaced. This realization can create a strange tension because it challenges the emotional story they have been telling themselves. They may have invested energy, attention, and even financial resources into proving that you were not who you appeared to be. Accepting the opposite conclusion requires humility that many people struggle to embrace. Yet reality has a way of becoming undeniable when enough evidence accumulates. At some point, the investigator likely reaches a stage where the findings cannot be interpreted in multiple ways. The pattern is too clear, the observations too consistent. They may deliver a report that summarizes everything they have seen during the investigation. Instead of presenting scandal or hidden secrets, the report likely describes routines filled with purpose, interactions marked by respect, and behavior that aligns with the same calm presence others have already observed. For the person reading this report, the moment can feel surreal. The investigation they expected would expose deception has instead exposed integrity. The outrageous discovery they imagined would destroy your reputation has transformed into something far more unsettling for their narrative: confirmation that you were genuine all along. What makes this outcome so powerful is that it was not created through effort to defend yourself or prove your character. You did not know you were being watched, so your behavior was not adjusted for the sake of appearances. The investigator observed the same person others already knew, simply moving through life with quiet authenticity. This is the unique strength of a life built on consistent values. When someone tries to examine it closely, they do not find hidden contradictions because there are none to conceal. Authenticity becomes its own form of protection. The more closely someone studies it, the more clearly it reveals itself. Ironically, the investigation that was meant to undermine your reputation begins strengthening it instead. The investigator, whose job was to uncover wrongdoing, now possesses first-hand knowledge that your life withstands scrutiny. Even if the person who hired them struggles to accept the conclusion, the evidence remains. A record now exists, showing that the calm, disciplined individual others observe publicly behaves the same way in private moments, where no one is supposed to be watching. And this realization carries a deeper message that extends beyond the investigation itself. In a world where many people carefully manage the image they present to others, authenticity often appears mysterious. People sometimes assume that someone who remains calm, patient, and consistent must be hiding something, because they cannot imagine maintaining that stability themselves. Yet the truth revealed by the investigation demonstrates something far simpler and far more powerful. The calm presence that once triggered suspicion was not a performance at all. It was the natural result of a person who has chosen to build their life around awareness rather than reaction. And in the end, the most outrageous discovery the investigator could report was not scandal, but the quiet proof that your character remains the same whether anyone is watching or not. Emerges at the moment when the investigation reaches its quiet but undeniable turning point. because every investigation eventually arrives at a stage where the evidence collected no longer leaves room for speculation. Up until now, the process had unfolded slowly, observation after observation, building a clearer picture of your life. At first, the investigator was simply gathering fragments of information. Your routines, your interactions, your habits, the environments you move through each day. But as the days turned into weeks, and perhaps weeks into even longer stretches of time, those fragments began forming a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The more carefully someone observed your life, the more obvious something became that the person who initiated the investigation never expected to face. The story they imagined about you was not supported by reality. Instead of uncovering manipulation, the investigator had documented discipline. Instead of hidden secrets, they had witnessed quiet consistency. Instead of contradictions between the way you appear publicly and the way you behave privately, they had found alignment that remained steady no matter where you were or who you interacted with. For the investigator, this moment often arrives with a sense of professional clarity. Their role is not to protect assumptions, but to report facts. When the evidence forms a clear pattern, their responsibility is to acknowledge what it reveals. And what the investigation revealed about you was something far more powerful than the scandal the person behind the investigation expected. It revealed a life that does not change depending on who is watching. The person the world sees is the same person who exists in quiet moments when there is no audience, no pressure to impress anyone, and no need to perform. Yet for the individual who initiated the investigation, this stage of the process may feel far more complicated. Accepting the results means confronting something difficult, the possibility that their entire suspicion was built on misunderstanding, insecurity, or projection. From the very beginning, they had convinced themselves that you were hiding something beneath your calm presence. They interpreted your discipline as mystery, your privacy as secrecy, and your composure as manipulation. Each assumption created a narrative that slowly grew stronger in their mind. By the time they decided to investigate you, that narrative probably felt like unquestionable truth. Yet now the investigation itself had begun dismantling that story, piece by piece. The evidence being delivered back to them did not confirm their expectations. Instead, it quietly contradicted them. Each report described ordinary routines filled with intention rather than deception. Each observation revealed behavior that remained stable across different situations. Instead of uncovering scandal, the investigator had uncovered character. And this is where the emotional tension of the situation reaches its highest point. Because when someone realizes that the person they tried to expose is exactly who they appear to be, they must confront a deeper truth about themselves. The investigation that was meant to reveal something outrageous about you begins revealing something about the mindset that initiated it. It exposes how easily assumptions can grow when someone encounters a person they cannot easily understand. Your calmness, which once made them uncomfortable, now appears in a completely different light. The discipline they once suspected was calculated now looks like self-control developed through experience. The privacy they once interpreted as secrecy now resembles healthy boundaries that protect your peace and focus. As this realization takes shape, the entire purpose of the investigation begins shifting. What started as an attempt to prove wrongdoing slowly transforms into something closer to a lesson in perception. The investigator, who spent weeks observing your life in detail, now possesses first-hand knowledge that your character withstands scrutiny. They have seen how you respond when situations become stressful. They have observed how you treat people who have nothing to offer you in return. They have witnessed your behavior during quiet moments when no one expects anyone to be paying attention. And through all those observations, the same conclusion continues appearing. The calm, disciplined individual others see publicly is not an illusion. It is simply who you are. Ironically, the investigation that was meant to weaken your reputation now carries the potential to strengthen it. Because when someone examines a life closely and finds no hidden contradictions, that absence becomes powerful evidence of authenticity. It shows that your stability is not dependent on reputation or external validation. It comes from internal alignment between what you believe and how you live. This alignment is what made the investigators' job unexpectedly difficult. They were searching for something that did not exist. Every time they looked deeper, they encountered the same pattern of thoughtful choices and measured responses. Over time, even the investigator may have developed a quiet respect for the person they were observing. Professional observation has a way of revealing details that casual attention often misses. They may have noticed the small decisions you make each day that reflect discipline. The way you choose patience when frustration would be easier. The way you remain focused on your path instead of reacting to distractions around you. The way you maintain boundaries without needing to explain them repeatedly. These behaviors rarely attract attention in ordinary circumstances. Yet, when someone studies them closely, they reveal a level of self-awareness that many people spend years trying to develop. Meanwhile, the person who initiated the investigation may begin experiencing a realization that feels almost surreal. The outrageous discovery they expected to receive has not appeared. Instead, the investigation has produced a mirror reflecting their own assumptions. They may now see that the mystery they once projected onto you was created by their own uncertainty. Your calm presence did not hide secrets. It simply exposed how unfamiliar genuine stability can appear to someone who has not yet developed it themselves. This realization does not always arrive easily. Sometimes it unfolds slowly as the person behind the investigation reviews the evidence again and again, searching for the missing piece that will confirm their original suspicion. Yet with every review, the same conclusion remains. The person they believed was hiding something extraordinary was simply living with quiet authenticity. And in that moment, the entire story surrounding you changes. The investigation no longer looks like an exposure of wrongdoing. Instead, it becomes an unexpected confirmation of your character. The attempt to uncover scandal has instead documented consistency. The effort to reveal deception has instead revealed discipline. And the search for something outrageous has instead uncovered something far rarer and far more powerful. Proof that your life remains aligned with the values you carry inside yourself. This turning point marks the moment when the investigation stops being about suspicion and begins revealing a deeper truth about authenticity itself. Because when someone lives with integrity, scrutiny does not destroy their reputation. It strengthens it. The closer people look, the more clearly they see the same pattern repeating over and over again. Calmness where others expect chaos. Discipline where others expect impulsiveness. And quiet strength where others once imagined hidden motives. And as the investigation reaches this stage, one thing becomes undeniable. The person who thought they would expose you has instead witnessed something they never expected to find. The quiet power of a life that remains the same, whether anyone is watching or not, unfolds as the full meaning of everything that has happened begins to surface. Because once the investigation reaches its final stage, the story is no longer about suspicion, curiosity, or even the act of being watched. Instead, it becomes about what the investigation unintentionally revealed to everyone involved. The person who initiated the search believed they were about to uncover something outrageous about your life. In their mind, they imagined that deeper scrutiny would eventually reveal the hidden flaw they were convinced must exist. Yet, as the investigation reached its conclusion, the opposite reality stood clearly in front of them. The closer someone looked at your life, the more consistent it appeared. The deeper someone examined your routines, the more your discipline became visible, and the more attention someone paid to your behavior, the more it confirmed that the calm presence they once questioned was not an act at all. This moment carries a powerful kind of irony, because the entire situation has quietly reversed itself. What began as an attempt to expose you has transformed into something else entirely. The investigation that was supposed to dismantle your reputation has instead become a form of confirmation. It verified that the person others see publicly is the same person who exists in private spaces where there is no audience, no pressure to impress anyone, and no need to perform a role. For the investigator who spent time observing your life, this realization likely arrived with clarity. Their notes, their observations, and their collected information all pointed toward the same conclusion. They had searched for contradictions and found alignment. They had looked for deception and found stability. They had expected hidden behavior and instead discovered routine discipline. Over time, even the investigator may have come to understand that the most remarkable aspect of the assignment was not something scandalous, but something quietly rare. In a world where many people present different versions of themselves depending on who is watching, they had encountered someone whose behavior remained consistent across every situation. Meanwhile, the person who initiated the investigation now stands in a very different position than where they began. When they first made the decision to look into your life, they believed they were about to confirm their suspicions. The narrative they had built in their mind felt convincing because it explained the discomfort they experienced when observing you. Your calm presence, your ability to remain composed under pressure, and your refusal to participate in unnecessary drama had all seemed mysterious to them. Instead of interpreting those qualities as strength, they interpreted them as signs that something must be hidden beneath the surface. But now the investigation itself has confronted them with evidence that challenges that interpretation. The more carefully someone studied your life, the more obvious it became that there was nothing extraordinary hiding behind your calm demeanor. What they had mistaken for mystery was actually self-mastery. What they had assumed was secrecy was actually privacy guided by awareness. What they believed was manipulation was actually discipline developed through experience. This realization can be deeply unsettling for someone who spent so much time convinced that they were right about you. Accepting the truth means acknowledging that the story they created about your life was never accurate in the first place. Yet this is precisely where the deeper lesson of the entire situation begins to appear. Because the investigation did not simply reveal something about you, it revealed something about the nature of authenticity itself. When someone builds their life around consistent values, their behavior does not change dramatically depending on who is watching. The same calm responses appear in public conversations and private moments. The same patience appears during ordinary days and during moments of challenge. The same discipline appears whether recognition is possible or not. Authenticity creates a kind of quiet strength that becomes visible when someone examines it closely. That is exactly what happened during this investigation. The person who hired someone to follow you believed they were about to uncover something outrageous. Instead, they unintentionally created the conditions that proved your character more clearly than any reputation ever could. Because when someone studies your life in detail and still finds the same pattern repeating again and again, that pattern becomes powerful evidence. It shows that your calmness is not situational. It shows that your discipline is not temporary. It shows that the stability people notice in you comes from something internal rather than something performed. For the investigator, this may have been one of the more unusual assignments they had encountered. Most investigations eventually uncover some kind of contradiction because human behavior is often inconsistent. Yet, in your case, the deeper they looked, the more the same alignment appeared. The person they were observing seemed to carry the same awareness through every part of their life. Over time, even the investigator may have recognized that what they were documenting was not deception, but integrity. And integrity is something that becomes more visible the longer it is observed. The person who initiated the investigation may now find themselves in an unexpected position. Instead of exposing you, they have become the person who unknowingly confirmed your authenticity. The resources they invested, the attention they focused on your life, and the time they spent searching for evidence have all led to a conclusion they never expected. The calm individual they believed must be hiding something has been quietly living according to the same principles all along. And in the end, this realization carries a message that reaches far beyond the investigation itself. Because the entire situation demonstrates something important about how character reveals itself over time. When someone builds their life around appearance rather than authenticity, scrutiny eventually exposes the cracks in that image. But when someone builds their life around genuine awareness and discipline, scrutiny produces the opposite effect. The closer someone looks, the stronger the evidence of integrity becomes. That is why the final stage of this story feels almost poetic. The person who believed they were about to prove something outrageous about you has instead witnessed something far more powerful. They have seen what happens when a life is built on internal stability rather than external approval. They have seen how calmness can be misunderstood by those who expect chaos. And they have seen how authenticity becomes impossible to hide once someone begins observing it closely. In the end, the investigation that once felt like a threat has quietly turned into a confirmation. It confirmed that your character remains steady regardless of circumstance. It confirmed that the calm presence others notice in you is not an illusion. And most importantly, it confirmed that the person you are when no one is watching is the same person the world sees every day, emerging naturally from everything that has unfolded. Because when a story like this reaches its end, it reveals something much deeper than the investigation that started it. What began as suspicion, curiosity, and quiet observation has ultimately become a reflection of character. The person who once believed they would uncover something outrageous about your life now stands in front of a very different reality. The deeper someone looked, the more your life revealed the same steady pattern. Calm where others expected chaos, discipline where others expected weakness, and quiet confidence where others once imagined hidden motives. The investigation that was meant to expose you has instead become evidence of something powerful. It proved that the person people see publicly is the same person who exists privately. There was no double life waiting to be uncovered, no hidden scandal beneath the surface, no secret version of yourself that appeared when no one was watching. Instead, there was consistency. There was self-awareness. There was the quiet strength of someone who built their life around internal principles rather than external approval. And this is where the deeper meaning of the entire situation becomes clear. Authenticity has a unique kind of resilience. When someone lives with integrity, scrutiny does not weaken their character. It strengthens it. The closer people look, the more clearly they see the same truth repeating itself. In the end, the most outrageous discovery anyone could make about you was not scandal at all, but the simple and powerful fact that you were genuine from the very beginning.